Thank you, Ajay ji, for this kind introduction and all your support throughout. I must say, before I start talking about the book, that Bharat Krishak Samaj and Ajay Veer ji has been a constant support for us in doing various academic activities in JNU. And he has always motivated me to ask tough questions whenever we have a discussion about some of these issues. I think the popular quote applies to us: we agree to disagree always. And there are very valid questions to explore. And I think that's what gives us motivation to look for newer questions and answers. So thank you very much for your support and these kind words. I must thank both the panelists, Shamika ji and Mekhla ji, for coming here, agreeing to be part of this panel, reading the book and agreeing to talk about it. Many thanks to Penguin for publishing. Karthik in Penguin has been a very good support. He was the one who actually, I think, helped me shape it. And to some extent, the title and the cover both were, sort of after a lot of dialogue. It was Karthik who helped me finalize it. So, no, he's not here. So, he's based in Bangalore. So, but now the whole idea behind power in social sciences is a very complex idea. I'm not getting into that here, but it actually indicates why we attach this notion of power with one group, one community, or maybe a group of people. So this book is exactly about that specific event which happened in 2021. Usually this question is asked in the beginning, that why this book on farmer movement, or sometimes some say, why another one? And it's a bit surprising to say that, but in case of India, though we have a long history of peasant movements and farmer movements, and its face changed after 1980s. But if you look at full-length book studies, there are not many books available, especially on the recent farmers' movements, which happened in the past 30 years or so. Now, in fact, as an academician, I teach a course on agrarian movement and politics, and thanks to some of the students who are here today. When we look at this history, especially the kind of mobilization which we saw on Delhi borders, this mobilization was unique in one sense, but mobilization in Delhi was not actually unique. It started with Chaudhry Charan Singh doing similar rallies in Delhi multiple times, again mobilizing thousands and thousands of people. And we also know about the Great Boat Club rally. And then there are always protests by farmers from Western UP on Delhi borders. Again, 10 to 20,000 farmers is not a big number. But what happened in 2021 was something very unique. For the first time in history, anywhere in the world, a large group of people camped on highways, stayed there through the most adverse times in the history, especially the pandemic. And what they were able to accomplish was something remarkable. That was one of the largest political parties in the world with an absolute majority in the parliament. And the farmer movement was able to force the government to actually repeal the 3 laws against which the movement happened. Now, one may agree or disagree with the movement and its causes, but what was remarkable in it, the kind of mobilization that happened, the kind of moral and political support it garnered. And as a political scientist, that was a question which were really something worth exploring for me. So when I started working on this book, I had these 2 things in mind. One is how to record that part of moment in the history, and 2, how to record it for the coming generation of students so that they don't forget about it. They know that there was something like this which happened in the history, and one can ask multiple questions around it. So, and then when I was writing the book, the challenge was what to cover and what not to cover, because there have been a lot of edited volumes and articles which were written about it, which did talk about the nature of mobilization, what farmers were doing, how were they doing. But the question was, what was the policy context with which they were actually grappling with? So one of the things which book does is to look at that policy context. The another thing which book tries to do is to look at this everyday life at the camps. How did it look like? But more importantly, it also looks at what kind of emotional aspects which what one could see on the borders. And there the book talks more about the question of a sense of dignity which farmers were trying to assert. Now, that's a theme which we have been exploring, and maybe I'll talk about it later. And the third aspect which the book touches upon is some of the philosophical issues. Now, one wonders, in a protest, how do you look at philosophical aspects? So, one question which book tries to explore is why the very prefix called black laws, why the blackness is attached to these laws. And blackness has a specific meaning, and that's the reason that it was brought along with these laws. And you have multiple newspaper reports, some of the booklets published by various associations, that what is the black in these laws. And there was an interesting dialogue which happened throughout when the government kept on asking that except the ink with which the laws were printed, what was black in it, we were not actually sure. And that's a question which looms large throughout. The second thing, the philosophical question which this book engages with, is the nature of mobilization on the highways. And that particular phenomena in this book is addressed as the Occupy, quite like the Occupy movement. But what was different with it, that it wasn't something...
Excuse me. Hello. Can you come and sit here, please? Just come and sit here. Sorry for interrupting.
No, it's all right. Young students are good to see them. Thank you. So, and finally, because I'm a teacher, researcher, so it's my job to bring in some of the conceptual categories, even in a what you call non-fiction book. So the phenomena called hybridity. So how this movement brought the old and new together and built something which was quite different from the way farmers' movements had been happening by the end of 20th century. So the concept of hybridity is also discussed in this. And while writing, this was a major challenge, that how do you write a book which is partly academic and partly non-academic, partly in a complex language with footnotes and bibliography, and partly in the form of a narrative. So these were some of the things which the book tried to do while talking about this historical moment of the Indian history. And then it also tries to look at this whole idea from the perspective which I begin with, the Barrington Moore's famous quotation, when he said that the Indian peasantry is not capable of any revolutionary kind of movement because of the way they are located in Indian society, ridden with caste and other ruptures. He was comparing Indian peasantry with French peasantry or Russian peasantry and so on. And while arguing, he talked that how the Indian peasantry was qualitatively different. So the book begins with that, and after talking about that moment, the book engages with other historical questions. So this movement is not being seen as a stand-alone moment. It is rather seen in a continuum, in a historical continuum, how it was built in the last 10 years or so, what were the issues which the farmers were grappling with. And then this question which Ajayji talked about in the end, what did it achieve? It's a very subjective reading also that we can talk later. But the book also tries to look at it from the farmer union perspective. How did they look at this entire question called accomplishment? And one of the things which they could was their primary major demand, which they said repeal of the three farm laws, and which they could actually in the end achieve. And finally, because you started with the question of game theory and rational choice theory, which economists in India have actually looked at, I'm glad that Shamika ji is here. So one of the things which book does, and which when I talk to my students I mention, that we need to move away a bit from rational choice and look at emotional choice which people make. And when you look at movements, they may not always be actually rational choice. And Ashutosh Varshney, a very famous political economy scholar, who talks about the countryside development, and he says, and he leaves it as a puzzle, that why those who could otherwise be seen as the losers because of a policy like MSP, they end up supporting it and standing for the farmers. And he says it's a puzzle which we need to look at. I think there is a conceptual shift which one has to think about when one is talking about it. I think I'll stop here, and I would like to listen to both the panelists, how do they look at it. And thank you very much for reading it. Thank you for coming. Thank you.